Welcome, everybody. I'm Jen Regnier. I'm the Director of Counseling and Social Work at Hinsdale Central, and I am joined tonight by Mike Holland, the Director of Counseling and Social Work at Hinsdale South, as well as Abel Montoya. Abel is the Director of Outreach Operations for the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and he is an expert in financial aid. So we are very happy to have him join us tonight and share with you some information about financial aid. We will start the program with Abel sharing his presentation, which will take about 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Feel free to add your questions in the chat throughout the presentation, and then we'll circle back to those at the end. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Abel.
Thank you, Jen. Good evening, everyone. My name is Abel Montoya, as Jen mentioned, and I'm going to talk about the financial aid process, but I'm going to throw a lot of information at you, okay? A lot of details, but I think if you can come away with three things, it's going to be a successful night. Number one, what is financial aid? Number two, where does it come from? And number three, how do I apply for it? If you come away with those three things, it's going to be a successful night. As Jen mentioned, I work at the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, and our goal as a state agency is basically to help students with their post-secondary plans, whatever those plans may be. We offer different types of grants and scholarships through the state. We have a number of programs, but my division, what we do is we go out and talk to students and parents about how the process works, because it can be a complex process, especially if this is your first child going through college, because things have changed over the years. Even if you had a student in the last, 3 or 4 years that went through college, things have changed since then till now, and things will continue to change. So what's going to happen is you're going to have lots of questions. All right. It's normal to have questions. It's expected to have questions. And the key thing is to make sure you get those questions answered. And there are a number of people that can help answer those questions, whether it's the folks at the counseling offices, they respective high schools, whether it's the folks in the admissions office at the various colleges to which you're applying, whether it's people like myself or my staff that, work with anyone that has questions about going to college, because college is expensive. As a parent, I'm thinking, how much is this going to cost me? Now, granted, my kid's very young. He's only in fourth grade, but I'm still thinking about, 8 years from now, how much will college be for me? How much do I have to pay out of my pocket? How am I going to do this? So and I've been doing this for a long time. So if I have those questions, I'm sure you do too. So when you have those questions, ask, because that's the way you get clarity on how the process works, because the process can vary from person to person. And what I mean by that is that there are different paths that people can follow. Okay, there's no one path that's right for everybody, but everybody will have a path that's right for them. Whether that path, goes to a vocational or certificate program, whether it means you want to get an associate's degree and then start working in whatever profession you prefer. Some people decide to go to community college and then transfer four-year school, and some people go directly into four-year school. Some students, go to four-year school, get their baccalaureate degree, and then they pursue a master's degree or a PhD or a JD or an MD. So there's different types of paths that people can pursue. And the thing you would want to recognize about that is that there's different expenses, okay, and different lengths of time it takes to achieve that goal. So understanding or coming to a realization as to what your path is going to be will help you navigate the process of paying for college. But the point being is that, one path does not fit all. Everyone is a little bit different. So when you're looking at colleges, I tell students, apply to multiple colleges so you get multiple offers of admission so that you can make an informed decision as to what is the right fit for you. It fit in the sense of academic, it's got the program that you want to pursue, social in the sense that you're going to be happy there, and financial in the sense that you don't have to worry about the finances because you already planned them out. But these are things that maybe your counselors already talked to you about. Now, what I'm here is to talk about the financial aid piece. So what is financial aid? Well, before I get into that, let me explain the philosophy behind Department of Education's and the financial aid principles. And basically, they're saying that the student is responsible to pay for his or her education. The student, not the parents, okay? Now, they assume the parents are going to contribute to the child's education, but they're not obligated to do so, unless, of course, there's some type of divorce decree where you've made some agreements you're going to pay for college. But other than that, parents are not obligated to pay for college. So it's all based on the student with the assumption that parents may contribute to the child's education. So with that being said, say the cost of attendance at a university is like this much, right? Hopefully you can see my hands. And say the family can afford this much. That difference between what it costs and what the family can afford is what financial aid is supposed to fill. And it fills that gap with money that's either given, borrowed, or earned. Okay, that's the three types of financial aid: money that's given, borrowed, or earned. And that's to meet that gap so they can afford the cost of attendance. Now, the cost of attendance, you're going to see this on colleges' websites. You're going to see this on their pamphlets and brochures that they pass out at college fairs. Take that number with a grain of salt. And what I mean by that is that some of these costs are fixed and they get billed directly from the university to the student. Okay. For example, tuition and fees. The university is going to bill the student their tuition and their fees. It is what it is. Okay. Now, living expenses, so that's like food and housing. Well, that depends. That depends if the student lives in university housing, whether they live with mom and dad because they're commuting, whether they get their own apartment. That could vary. If they live in the university housing, then they're billed directly by the university. But if they live elsewhere, then they pay other people to live there. Or if they live with mom and dad, maybe mom and dad doesn't charge them anything. But the point being, that number can go up or down depending on the situation. And likewise with housing, I mean, the more amenities you have with the residence hall that you choose, if you go away to college, the more expensive that will be. If you live in a suite by yourself, that's much more expensive than if you got one roommate, which is more expensive than if you have two roommates. Now let's look at the meal plans. If you start off with the most basic meal plan, and you're like, well, hold on a second, what do you mean the most basic, Abel? Well, I tell families, I tell students, are you always going to get up for breakfast? Are you always going to eat lunch and dinner in the same residence hall? Are you never going to go home on the weekends? If you start out with a basic meal plan, and then you decide, you know what, I think I need more meal credits. If you let a university know, hey, can I get a more expensive meal plan? They'll let you spend more money. Universities are really good about letting you spend more money, signing more expensive contracts. Now, if you start out with the most expensive meal plan and you want to decrease it, they're gonna pause. They're gonna like, well, we got an agreement with the vendor next year. So I tell students start with the most basic meal plan, and slowly but surely you're kind of mitigating those costs of attendance. Books and supplies, each college is a little bit different. Some colleges, rent their books. Some colleges, have some information online. If you have to buy books, I tell students buy the used books. It's the same stuff as the new books. And I joke around with them. I say, get the book from the kid that got an A in the class. All the stuff's already underlined for you. All right. Transportation costs. How do you get to the campus? If you're commuting, how are you commuting? Are you driving? Are you taking public transportation? If you're going away to college, how are you coming back home? Are you taking the train? Are you taking the bus? Do you have to fly? University of Hawaii is beautiful, but Amtrak doesn't go to Hawaii. You got to fly. All right. Now, what's the frequency with which you come home? That affects the transportation costs. Miscellaneous expenses would be like, your shampoo, your toiletries, things like that. But there's some things you don't need. Maybe you cut costs on eating out and take advantage of the resources on campus or the offerings on campus. I'm mentioning these things so you can understand how that cost of attendance can go up or down depending on the choices the student makes, where they go to college, what kind of housing options they choose. But nevertheless, financial aid is going to try to meet that cost of attendance. Now let's go back to financial aid. So there are two types of financial aid. There's gift aid and there's self-help aid. Okay. Gift aid is exactly that, money that is gifted. It's given to the student for the purposes of going to college. And there's two types of gift aid. You have the grants and scholarships. Some people use them interchangeably, but there is a little bit of a difference. The grants typically have a need-based component. Okay, so they're given to students who demonstrate some type of financial need. Scholarships can be given on anything that the scholarship given entity decides the criteria to be. Could be based on merit, like academics. It could be based on athletics. It could be based on your major. It could be based on your gender. It could be based on where you grew up, where you went to school. It's whatever the scholarship organization deems their criteria to be, that's what it is. Okay. But in both cases, grants and scholarships, that's money that's given. It doesn't have to be repaid. With self-help aid, you have to do something in exchange for that money. For example, work study is a specific type of job on campus. And I'll talk about it a little bit later, where the student goes, gets a job, earns money, and gets a paycheck. So in that case, they got to work to get that money. With loans, you got to pay them back. All right, that's the thing. Now the caveat with loans: only borrow what you need and no more. Only borrow what you need and no more, because these loans will have to be paid back. They're not dischargeable in bankruptcy, with rare exception. Okay, so borrow carefully, because because Do you have to pay them back? And we'll talk about those a little bit more because there's a lot more details associated with that. All right. So those are the two main types of financial aid, and they come from four main sources. And the reason why it's important to understand the source is because each source has their own criteria as to who's eligible for that type of aid. So the four main sources are the federal government, which would be the Department of Education, the state government, which actually is our agency, the Illinois Student Assistance Commission, which is where I work, the colleges and universities, because they have their own institutional funds, and then the private sources, that would be like the scholarship organizations. Okay, now if a student is a U.S. citizen or U.S. permanent resident, they qualify for all four sources: the federal government, the state money, the college money, the private sources. If the student is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, well, they do not qualify for any federal aid, but they qualify for the other three sources: the state money, the college money, and maybe private sources. Okay, so that's what situation where the eligibility student determines for which monies do they qualify. Okay, for example, in Illinois, if someone's not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, but they meet other criteria such as graduate from Illinois high school, being in the K through 12 system for at least 3 years, live with a parent or guardian those 3 years, and then they sign an affidavit saying they're going to apply for U.S. permanent residency as soon as they're eligible, they qualify for state aid. Okay, so understanding the source helps you kind of determine for which sources, which type of financial aid do I qualify. Now, if you qualify for federal money, we have the federal Pell Grant. Currently, or for this last cycle, it was $7,395 maximum for the year for a full-time student going to a four-year university. But the subsequent year, they're going to increase it to by $100 to $74.95. Okay. Now that would be for someone who has maximum financial need. If the family doesn't have as much need, well, that Pell Grant amount could be lower or maybe not even qualify for it at all. Okay. If you went to community college, that amount is prorated because the community colleges are less expensive. Okay. But this would be at a four-year institution. Now, since this is federal money, it could be used anywhere across the U.S. Okay. So once again, the source has its conditions where it can be used. Now, some colleges have what's called Federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, or FSEOG for short. And this is a program where some colleges participate, but not others, because the colleges have to put in a portion of that money. So say there's a $1,000 FSEOG grant, the college typically will put in $250 from their funds and $750 will come from the federal funds. So that's why some colleges participate in FSEOG, others do not. And that's why some, have the maximum amount of 4,000, some as low as 100. Okay. Knowing these things will help explain why some financial aid offers will differ from one college to another college. Now, I had mentioned work study. Now, with the work study program, it's going to be, a student will be automatically considered for a work study when they fill out their FAFSA, which is the federal form. And I'll talk about the FAFSA in just a little bit. With the work study program, the student will be notified in the financial aid offer that they're eligible for work study, and they'll list the amount that they can, the maximum amount that they can earn from working. Now, the key with work study is that departments at a university will say, we have a work study position open. They will advertise it as such. That means that only students that have the work study designation on their financial aid offer can apply for those positions. And the reason that is so is because part of the hourly wage is paid through federal funds. So hypothetically, say that the student gets paid $10 an hour. $250 comes from the college, $750 comes from federal funds. So it's cheaper for universities to hire work study students because it's less of a burden on their budget because most of the money comes from federal funds. And that's why it's considered financial aid. And the student will automatically be considered for work study. They still have to go apply, get a job and whatnot. Now, the good thing with work study is if they do have a work study job, those earnings do not count as income for the following year when the student is doing their FAFSA again. Okay, so that's a campus-based type of financial aid. Now, the federal government also offers loans, student loans. Okay, so we have the federal subsidized and the federal unsubsidized loans. Okay, they're both given directly to the student. They do have a limit of $5,500. Now, of this $5,500, up to $2,000 could be subsidized, and then $3,500 would be unsubsidized. So what does that mean? Well, when a federal loan is subsidized, that means the government pays the interest on that loan while the student is enrolled at least half time in college. Once the student drops below halftime, and hopefully they do drop below halftime because they graduated, then the student is responsible for the interest and the principal on that loan after a certain grace period. Okay. With the unsubsidized loans, the student or the parents are responsible for the interest on that loan after the loan is dispersed. Okay. Now, if a family says, "Abel, could I defer making payments on that unsubsidized loan and that interest?" Yes, you can, but then it's capitalization in the sense they take the interest, that's unsubsidized interest the student is supposed to be responsible for, and add it on to the principal, so the loan becomes bigger. So if someone gets an unsubsidized loan, it behooves them to pay the interest just to keep that amount lower. Okay. Now the thing about also unsubsidized direct loans is that they are not need-based, which means any family, regardless of your income threshold or income that you have, will qualify at a minimum for the federal unsubsidized loans. And I often get that question, Abel, should I even bother filling out that form? And I tell them, it's up to you. I encourage you to do it, but if you don't want to, you don't have to be. But when you don't fill out the form, you're basically telling the college, I'm just going to write a check for the full cost of attendance. Don't worry about it. I got it covered. Now, some colleges may say, we still want you to fill that out because we want to make sure you've exhausted all types of financial aid or monies for college before we dig into our own pockets and give you some institutional aid. Okay. So those are reasons why I think everyone should fill out the FAFSA. Okay. Now, there's also a loan called the PLUS loan, parent loan for undergraduate students. Right? The operative word there is parent. Okay. Now, there's also parent plus loan for grad students, which is a little odd with the nomenclature. But the parent loans, if a parent gets offered a parent plus loan, the parent is responsible for that loan, not the student, the parent. Okay, so parents, please proceed with caution. Okay, because I mentioned the federal subsidized and unsubsidized loans, directly to student, the maximum is $5,500. Okay, so let's go back to my examples. The cost of attendance is this much, your family can afford this much. Student gets some grants, some scholarships, some subsidized loans, unsubsidized loans, whatever the remaining gap is, that's going to be the limit for the parent plus loan. I've seen some pretty big ones. I've seen parent plus loans of $15,000 a year. If the student's pursuing a 4-year degree, you can do the math, $60,000 in parent plus loans. Now, does that make sense? It depends on the family. For my wife and me, it's just us three, my wife, myself, and my son. Maybe it makes sense. Okay, because I only got one kid. I don't have to worry about another kid coming on the line because if I have multiple children, what does that mean for them? And when they go to college and I have to pay for their expenses. That's one consideration. The other consideration is how old is the parent? Like before you say, well, it's none of your business how old I am, Abel. Well, think about it. If you're older, you're closer to retirement. If you take out these parent plus loans, does that mean you have to wait on retirement a little bit longer? That's why I say it's a family decision. You look at the dynamics of your family, what you're comfortable borrowing or not borrowing to see if it makes sense. So it's always good to have these conversations early on before you get those financial aid offers to kind of assess what are the parents comfortable in contributing to their child's education, especially if you have multiple children, and what do the parents expect from the student to contribute from their portion, because these plus loans could get quite expensive. Now with loans, a few things to consider. What's the source of the loan? What's the interest rate? And what's the grace period? Now, the source of the loan, as I mentioned, I work for the state of Illinois. I don't work for the federal government. But in my opinion, the federal loans are the best ones because let me rephrase it, they have the most benefits. Because if someone takes out federal loans and then they find themselves having some difficulty paying those loans back, they can get into income-driven repayment programs where they lessen the amount they have to pay each month, or there's some federal loan forgiveness programs. And for eligibility for the loan forgiveness programs, they have to be federal loans. If you get a private loan, those don't qualify for those income-driven repayment programs or those loan forgiveness programs. With the federal loans, the interest rates are fixed for the lifetime of the loan. With private loans, they could be variable. They could go up or down, or they could be fixed. You got to look at that interest rate, just like buying a house, the lower, the better. Okay. That makes a difference, the loans that you're willing to take out or not take out. And then the repayment period or grace period. With the direct loans to students, there's a 6-month grace period after you drop below halftime. Okay. For the parent plus loans, it's 60 days after they disperse the full amount for that first year. Okay. So there's different grace periods. Now, theoretically or technically, the parents can defer that interest on the parent plus loan, but once again, you got capitalization, it ends up being added to the principal. So it gets pretty high. So that's the federal side. On the state side, we have the MAP grant. This is a state grant. We're going to get over $700 million for this grant. We turn around and give it all to the students. We're going to give it to about 125, 130,000 students. It's up to $8,400 for the year. Okay. If you attend a community college, it's going to be prorated to about $2,550. Now, the thing with this is that since it's a state grant, it can only be used in the state of Illinois. Okay. And only at MAP eligible colleges, which would be all the community colleges, all the public universities, all the private not-for-profit institutions, and then a couple for-profit. So we're talking about 125, 128 colleges in the state of Illinois. If you decide to go outside the state and you were MAP eligible because of your income situation in the household, you couldn't use the MAP out of state. So that's the condition. So that's why some financial aid offers may vary. And then I threw up here the Illinois Veterans Grant, the Illinois National Guard Grant, in case students are interested in going to the military after college or being a National Guard, because those are additional programs specifically for students in the state of Illinois. And then we have a program for grants of dependents of police, fire, and correction officers who were killed in the line of duty or 90% disabled. That's a separate grant. So we have those. Now, I mentioned that we have some scholarships. There's some at the federal level, like the TEACH grant, and then there's some at the state level, like the NTI, the Illinois Special Education Teacher Tuition Waiver, and the ECACE program. Those are set up because we need more teachers in those specific areas. For example, MTI, Minority Teachers of Illinois, we need more teachers of color, more African American, Latino, Native American, Asian American students. And what happens with that is, with that scholarship, every year they get it, they have to teach for 1 year after college in a school that has 30% minority enrollment or more. Okay. Now, what happens if they don't fill that teaching commitment? Someone says, Abel, I got the MTI for 2 years. I'm supposed to teach for 2 years at a school that has 30% minority enrollment. I don't want to be a teacher anymore. Is that okay? Well, yeah, people change their mind. But that money we gave you, that $7,500, we want it back. So that converts into a loan. I mentioned that to you because sometimes scholarships will have conditions associated with them. You may have to have a teaching commitment, like in this case. You may have to stay in a specific major. You may have to maintain certain GPA. So understand the conditions of those scholarships when you do get scholarships. Now, the Special Education Teacher Tuition Waiver, SETTW, that's for anyone that wants to get into special ed because we need more special ed teachers. You get that, you have to teach for 2 years in special ed in the state of Illinois. So keep those things in mind, that there are programs for different people pursuing different things, but sometimes they come with conditions attached to them. Now, sometimes families say, Abel, there's no way I can afford college. We hardly make any money whatsoever. We don't file taxes because we don't have any income. I can't go to college. Well, surprise, you can. All right. This is an example of a family has maximum financial need. Say they go into a MAP-approved college in Illinois for a university. They qualify for $8,400 from the MAP grant up to $7,395. We're talking almost $16,000 in free money to go to college in Illinois. Okay. Now, this is one example of family on one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, you may either get less of these grants or none of these grants, and maybe just get work study or maybe student loans or maybe parent plus loans. So it's kind of a sliding scale. The free money goes to those with the most need. Now, with that being said, never let the initial cost of attendance dissuade you from applying to a college. It's not how much it costs up front, it's how much it's going to be at the end. When they show you that financial aid offer, then you can make a decision, is this financially viable for me or not? Some of the most expensive colleges are some of the most generous colleges because they have huge endowments. In Illinois, the colleges that come to mind are Northwestern, a University of Chicago. They got billion with a B, $1 billion endowments. If you get admitted, if you're fortunate enough to get admitted to one of those colleges, they're going to be pretty generous with the institutional aid. Okay. You may not get the free money from the state or federal government, but you may get some money from the college itself. All right. So how do I apply for this cost? Well, you got to complete an application. The first step is complete an application. Then if you get select for verification, you complete that process because they may want to verify some data that you input into the system. Then you get those financial aid offers. Okay. You review them, you make a decision, you respond to the colleges, complete any pending processes like sign up for housing and things like that. And then you do the application again. Right. So let's go to the first step. You complete an application. You complete an application. The FAFSA is the main one for most people. This would be for students who are U.S. citizen permanent residents. The status of the parents does not matter because it's all based on student eligibility. Okay. It's the free application for federal student aid. The operative word there, free. You don't pay any money to fill out the FAFSA. Now, if the student is not a U.S. citizen or permanent resident, then they fill out the alternative application, and that's for solely for the state of Illinois. But if they're eligible for federal aid, do the FAFSA, not the alternative app. Don't do both. Okay. And that's specifically students who meet certain criteria. Now, the colleges themselves may have a separate application. Oftentimes, the college application for admission is what they use to consider students for institutional aid, along with the FAFSA or the alternative app. But some colleges will have what's called the CSS profile, which is separate from the FAFSA form. With the CSS profile, that's used in Illinois. I think it's like about 6 colleges. The ones that come to mind are University of Chicago, Northwestern, Lake Forest, Illinois Wesleyan. I forget the other 2. But those are the ones, and that's only for institutional aid. They say, we want a little bit more information about you to see if you qualify for institutional aid. Now, and you say, well, how does that differ? Well, then or why do they even do that? Well, it's kind of to discern who's more lower middle class versus upper middle class versus, even more higher than upper class. And what I mean by that is, say it's a family of 4, you're making $150,000 a year. You're not going to get any free money. Okay. You may just get student loans and that's it. But say you go into a college that's super expensive, they ask you to do a CSS profile. They're going to see, okay, well, let's take a deeper dive to look at your situation to see if maybe we can use institutional money, because a family of 4 making 150 grand may have more financial need than a family of 4 making $450,000. Okay. We're talking pretty big incomes, but a difference, because there is a difference, and they'll ask for other questions that the FAFSA does not. For example, the FAFSA will not look at the value of the home in which you live. The CSS profile may ask for the equity in your home. The FAFSA will not ask for the value of the IRA, your 401k, your pension fund. The CSS profile may. So like I said, they dive a little bit deeper. So the only way to find out if the school requires that is either to go to College Board's website that lists all the schools that are required, or ask the college itself. The CSS profile is not free. Well, let me rephrase it. If you make $100,000 or less, it's going to be free. If you make north of that, you're going to pay, I think it's like $25 for the first college you list, and then like $16 or $14 for subsequent colleges. So there is a cost associated with that. Now let's go back to the FAFSA alternative application. So what is it that you need? Your records of income. Now with the FAFSA itself, when the parent logs in to add their information, they're going to select the option to where they click a button that they approve the IRS sending the tax information over to the FAFSA, so everything comes over. Okay, so you don't have to manually enter any information. There are exceptions. The exceptions would be if the situation has changed for the parents. For the FAFSA for the 25-26 year, because that's what you always apply for the year the student will be in college. So as soon as they graduate in 2025, May of 2025, we'll fill out the 25-26 FAFSA. That FAFSA is going to look at the income information from 2023. The parents were married in 2023, but now they're separated or divorced. Only one of the parents will enter their information. So they have to manually enter because the tax information in 2023 is not accurate of the current situation now. All right. But so you need to be aware of your financial situation. They're going to look at records of income and assets, like your savings account, your checking account. Assets would include such things as mutual funds, stocks, bonds, UGMAs, UTMAs, things like that. If you own a business, the value of the business is considered an asset. You got to, of course, take the depreciation out of it. In essence, if you have a business and you sold it, how much would you clear? That's the value of the asset. Okay. 529 plans are considered an asset, but only for the kid for whom you're filling out the FAFSA. If you have 3 kids, and you got 3 529 plans, and the oldest kid is doing the form, you only include the value of the 529 plan for the oldest kid. That's a change from previous years. And that's only if the parent's the owner. If grandma or grandpa or the aunt and uncle or another family member is the owner, you don't report it at all. Okay. Now you say, oh man, I should have grandma and grandpa, do a 529 plan for my kid. Well, when you become grandparents, you can do that for your grandchildren, all right? But currently, just keep that in mind. Currently, only if it's a parental asset that's reported. And then the list of colleges. On the FAFSA, you can list up to 20 colleges to receive your information. You don't have to apply to them. You don't have to have been admitted to them. You just list them. All right. They just leave that information on side. They don't do anything with the form until the student is actually admitted to the university. Then they pull the FAFSA information, the alternative application information, and generate the financial aid offer. If the student is doing a FAFSA, they'll need their social security number, or if they're a U.S. permanent resident, they'll need a registration number. And then an FSAD, which is basically a student aid account, a studentaid.gov account. The student has one, the parent has one, because the student does their section and the parent does their section, and you need your own account to complete that. All right. And you use that to log in and to sign the form itself. It's pretty straightforward in that regards. Now, let's talk briefly about parents. Who's a parent? A parent is someone who's the biological, adoptive, or step parent if married. No one else. Seems pretty obvious, right? But every once in a while, I get questions like, "Well, we live with grandma, and they support us. We live in the house. Do we report grandma's information?" No, no, no. Grandma's not the parent. You are the parent. Only parents' information is reported. Legal parents, foster parents, grandparents, they're not parents for purposes of the FAFSA. The FAFSA is only going to ask for information from the student and for the parent. Now they may say, well, how do I make my student independent? They got to be married, over 24, military veteran, pursuing a graduate degree, be a ward of the court, be in legal guardianship as determined by a court, be homeless and unaccompanied. Very specific scenarios. If you don't fall into those scenarios, you're considered dependent. You have to put parental information. Not being claimed on a tax return does not make a student independent for purposes of the FAFSA. Keep that in mind. Okay, so let's go to the parents. Okay, what happens if which parents do I report? Okay, are the parents married to each other? Yes, then both of the information. No, they're not. Okay, if they are unmarried, are they living together? Yes, then it's both parents. If they're unmarried, living together. If they're not, okay, well then, which parent provided the most financial support in the last 12 months? That's the parent. If you tell me Abel is exactly the same, equal amount of financial support, you're not going to believe it. We counted to the penny, exactly the same. All right, then it's the parent who has the biggest income and assets. So I encourage you, dig a little deep and count the pennies. Okay. Now, say my wife and I get divorced, right? And my son lives with me. I'm supporting my son. I get a new girlfriend, right? It would just be my information. If I were to marry that person now becomes the step parent, and they have to include their information on my son's FAFSA, regardless of what their personal opinions are about contributing to my child's education. This is where I tell families, I'm not giving you marital advice. I'm just telling how things are supposed to be reported on the FAFSA. So that's how I report it when the parents are not together. All right. And then you sign it. When you go into the FAFSA at the end, there's going to be a button that you sign. The student signs, the parent signs. With the alternative application, you get a pen emailed to them, and you use that to sign. But when you log into the FAFSA with your credentials, at the end, you just click the sign button and your section is complete. All of this is done to generate what's called a student aid index. This is a number, an index that says this is what we think, that we being the Department of Education, think the family can contribute to the child's education. And this is what the colleges use to determine how much financial need the families may have. Okay. It can actually be a negative number. Doesn't mean you get extra money, just means it's a negative number. You have quite a bit of need. All right. It's also a number used to determine eligibility for federal aid and state aid, and colleges use it for institutional aid. Now, you may get selective verification. About 18% of students are randomly selected by the Department of Ed, and the college will send a letter to students or an email or to the student through their student portal saying we need documents A, B, and C by this certain deadline. If you get select verification, you got to complete it, because if you don't, financially it gets stuck right there. It doesn't move forward. And only send them A, B, and C. If they ask for documents A, B, and C, and you send them A, B, C, D, E, and F, even if they didn't ask for the extra documents, by federal statute, they're required to look at everything that comes across their desk and reconcile any inconsistencies. Okay, so just keep that in mind. If they ask you for documents, make sure you don't send your only copy. Make sure you keep copies of that. Like I said, only provide the information you submit. This is all confidential too. And then if you have a unique situation and you need to talk to the financial aid office, and it's a big university, personal advice, get the name of the person with whom you spoke, okay, and write it down so then you can ask for that person again, or you can say, hey, I spoke with this person, on this day over this topic, so you keep a paper trail. All right. So now let's go back to the SAI, the cost of attendance. So the colleges will look at that cost of attendance, subtract that SAI, which would be the parental contribution, to come up with a financial need when they do the award letters. Now, the other thing too is, in this example, you got college A, B, and C, and the cost of attendance, you see that college C is the most expensive. The SAI stays the same, but then you see this OFA, other financial aid. That would be like any institutional aid that the college sent you ahead of time, or any outside scholarships that are coming your way. Sometimes colleges will send a letter to a student saying, "Hey, you qualify for, our presidential scholarship based on your academics and so forth." And you get that even before you do a FAFSA. That would be the other financial aid. So between that other financial aid, that could affect your remaining need. In this case, college C ends up being pretty cheap because they got other financial aid. And this could be a college that has a big endowment and it's giving you a lot of institutional aid. Now, the question with this remaining need is, how was it met? Okay. And this is where you compare those financial aid offers. All right. So did they meet that financial gap, that financial need, with grant money, which is free, with scholarships, which are free, with work study, got to get a job, with loans? What kind of loans? Were they subsidized? Were they unsubsidized? Were they Parent Plus loans? Now you see how that comes into play. That's where you compare those financial aid offers. Now, the other thing too is, if you're applying to private colleges, they do tuition discounting. And now some people say, well, you got to negotiate with them. I like to take a different approach to them. I like to take the approach of working like on the same side of the table. You bring you go to them and say, listen, I got my child here. They really want to go to your college, but we just need a little bit of extra help here to kind of make it work for us. This other college gave us something a little bit better packaging. Is there something you can do comparable? And so approach it from that perspective and do it before you accept their offer of admission. Because if you already told them you're coming, they're like, well, you're already coming, hey, welcome, hey, it is what it is. But if you meet with them before you accept that offer, they may be willing to throw in some extra money. They may actually discount the tuition. They may just lower it so they can get you to commit to the institution. So that's a way by which you can kind of help close that gap. Now, if you go to them and say, hey, we want $40,000 more, they're going to laugh at you, right? But if you come with something reasonable and to really make it work and you're really sincere about going to the institution, they'll work with you. That's different than if you have a situation that is adversely affecting your financial situation. And what I mean by that is, say one of the parents, there's two parents, one of the parents, loses their job, or were given notice they're going to be laid off, or the income from 2023 is very different than the income in 2024. In those cases, you communicate with the financial aid office, whether it's a private college or a public university, and explain their situation. They may ask, or your situation, they may ask for documentation to corroborate what you're telling them, but they can adjust your financial aid offer because you have exchanged circumstances. That's different than telling them, hey, could you give us a little bit more money? But the public universities, it is what it is. They're cheaper. This is what it is. And unless you have exchanged circumstances, they're not going to change the financial aid offer. Private colleges, they may. Okay. But in both cases, anytime there's some exchange circumstances, communicate with them. All right. And that's where once again, you look at that financial aid offer to see what makes sense and dig a little bit deeper. If you get a scholarship on the financial aid offer that says $1,500 freshman scholarship, the key word there is freshman. That's not going to be available for your sophomore year. Okay. So that means sophomore year, you got to, cough up an extra $1,500 for that sophomore year. Right. Keep things in mind, extrapolate the cost. If you're taking loans, what are the loans going to be for the length of the program, whether it's a 2-year program or 4-year program? Keep those things in mind so you can make a decision where you don't have to worry about finances because you already planned that out. And then you make a decision, you tell them where you're going to go. And then you tell the other colleges that you're not going to go there. So they take you off their mailing list and they free up your email. And then you complete any subsequent processes like signing up for housing, sign up for orientation, housing if you're going to live on campus, placement testing if it's required. You do that. So you do those things over the summer. So come fall, you're good to go. Okay. And then you fill out the form every year. Currently that's the way it is. A few more things, apply as soon as it becomes available. Typically it's available October 1st. So typically it would have been available next week, but due to the federal student aid making numerous changes to their form, it's not going to be available to December. Okay, but I expect for the next year, for the next cycle, it's going to be in October. So I tell families, get it done before Thanksgiving, so you don't have to worry about it with the holidays. And then this way, everything's in place. So for you folks, get it done in December, get it done early. Okay. So then, because otherwise, the holidays, New Year's, it could take a little longer. And the colleges won't be able to give you an accurate financial aid offer until they have the FAFSA information or the alternative application on file with them. Okay. So keep track of deadlines, because sometimes colleges will say, we want you to complete your FAFSA by April 1st to be considered for institutional aid. That deadline does not affect federal or state money, but it may affect institutional money. So, be aware of those deadlines. Continue to apply for scholarships, never too early or never too late. And what I mean by that is, I see students get really gung-ho about applying for scholarships as senior in high school, but once they're in college, they stop. I'm like, why are you stopping? There's scholarships for students continuing in college, for sophomores and juniors in college. Keep applying for the scholarships, okay? And everything that's submitted through these applications are confidential. We have a student portal at isac.org/student portal. And I'll give you a couple URLs in just a moment, where you can do a free scholarship search. But I'm pretty sure your high schools have their own scholarship search database. So take advantage of that. At our student portal, we have a financial aid offer comparison tool where you can enter information. So you compare financial aid offers side by side, because they come in different formats, and sometimes they're pretty convoluted. Sometimes they only include tuition and fees and leave out like transportation, personal expenses, and those supplies out. I've seen some crazy things out there. And when you want more information, go to studentaid.gov. That's the main website with tons of information. If you fill out the FAFSA, you go to FAFSA.gov. Our student portal also is there. The alternative application is through ISAC. And then for students who may be the first in their family to go to college, first in their family to potentially earn a four-year degree, we have what's called a First Gen Scholars Network. And all we really do is provide additional communication over the summer between high school and college, and then check in with you in college to make sure see if you need any assistance with the application for financial aid. And we provide additional support to help navigate the process. Anyone's welcome. Technically, if you go to our First Gen website, you fill out a join now. You can actually, there's a question that says, do either of your parents have a four-year degree? If you say yes, you don't get that first generation messaging, but you still get other messaging. Like, we'll send you a text when the FAFSA becomes available. If for some reason the state money is going to run out, we'll send you a text. It's going to run out. And that number, because we ask for your mobile phone, that's the number that you can text questions to, because the number from which the message is coming, that's where you can text your questions to us and we'll answer them for you. We're here year round. And the last tidbit is that I have staff throughout the state. So these are my two core members for your general area, the College of DuPage District. We divide up the state geographically, Crystal and Angelo. And these are individuals that can meet with you one-on-one and help you with the application. They can answer questions. I was actually going to have them join me today, but they're both doing presentations right now this evening at other locations. And all you have to do is go to studentportal.isac.org/ISAC core, enter your zip code, and their info will come, because ultimately you want to get your questions answered. And that's why we're here. We want you to get your questions answered. You can get your degree, get a great job, make tons of money, because then you pay taxes. Then it goes to the budget in Springfield, and Springfield gives us more money for MAP, which we in turn give to students. It's that cycle. And besides, people with a post-baccalaureate or post-secondary credential, they vote, they're civically minded, they volunteer. It makes our communities better. And that's why we do what we do, because we want the best for you and for our communities. Okay, I'm at 45, I went 5 minutes over, so I'm going to stop and see if people have questions. Hopefully this was helpful.
It was great.
Yeah, no, that was
Thank
great.
you. Yeah, and if you have questions, you can put it in the chat or in the Q&A. The first question was about multiple children, whether they're in the same grade, like twins or triplets, or if you have multiple children across multiple grades, but in college at the same time, how that works.
Well, before there used to be a question that says, how many kids do you have in college? They took that question out or are taking it out. I haven't seen the new iteration of the FAFSA just yet. It does not affect the SAI calculation any longer. It does not. Okay. Now, with that being said, you got two kids in college. It's expensive. talk to the colleges and explain your situation, especially if it's like a private college with pretty high tuition, and let them know you have two in college. Okay. Because they may take that into account, because they take other things into account. For example, let's go back to the CSS profile real quickly. Sometimes, depending on the colleges to which you're sending that CSS profile, because you can indicate the colleges, they'll include additional information. For example, they'll say, are any of your kids in private school? Because they're maybe a private college, so they take that into account. Some of them may say, do you have multiple kids in college? Because they'll take that into account. So technically, it does not affect the SAI calculation, but colleges can take it into account based on their own discretion. And that's why I think 529 plans are the best. And I just want to reemphasize a few things about the FAFSA. Don't report the value of the home in which you live. Do not report the value of 401k or IRA or pension plans. Those are not reported on the FAFSA, but they may be asked in the CSS Pro.
Another question, Abel, is do both parents have to create a FAFSA ID or just one parent?
It depends how you file your taxes. So, and I assume the question is when both parents are in the household. If both parents are in the household, like my wife and I, or I say my son's a senior in high school, we filed our 2023 taxes filing jointly married. Yeah, we're married filing jointly. There we go. Married filing jointly. That's the phrase that they use. In that case, since there's only one tax return, only one of us needs an account because only one of us needs to give approval for the IRS to transfer the tax information over to the FAFSA. If we had filed married filing separately, then both of us need to create accounts, both of us log in, and both of us approve to have our respective tax returns transferred over to the FAFSA. So it depends on how the taxes were filed when there are two parents in the household. And one more thing too, the student would actually invite the parent to be a contributor to their FAFSA if the student starts the FAFSA. Otherwise, if the parent starts the FAFSA, which is an option, they just need to have the student's name, social security number, date of birth, then the student will get an invitation saying, hey, your parent filled out a FAFSA, complete it, finish it off.
Okay, let's see. What is considered untaxed income?
Untaxed income would be, so what happens is when the information is transferred from the IRS to the FAFSA, it includes your adjusted gross income. That's all the taxable income. Untaxed income could be information such as like distributions from a Roth IRA. That's not taxed. Okay, that could be an untaxed income. Now, they can be more specific. There's all kinds of different things. I'm having a hard time thinking of what those are, but usually that kind of stuff gets transferred. You collect it, but both the Roth IRA, you funded that account with the post-tax dollars. You're not reporting the value of the account. You're reporting distributions that you're pulling out. But if it's in the tax return, it's taxable. Okay.
There's a question about if the parents have their own business.
Mm-hmm.
They asked the question, will that need to be reported on the FAFSA? So to reiterate, the value of that business would need to be reported, correct?
Correct. So a business or investment farm are considered assets now. Before they weren't, but now they are. And you report the value of that home after you subtract the debt. Okay. Now, the easiest way to figure this out, it would be if I sold my business, how much money would I make? All right. Now, if the business is, say, I'm an independent consultant, I go give presentations and I get paid. This is my business, my noggin, right? So it's a value of zero because there's nothing to report. There's no brick and mortar building. There isn't any equipment. And you're like, well, that doesn't seem fair. Well, remember, the income that I get as a consultant is reported as taxable income on my tax return, so they already have that. They're trying to determine what is the asset of that individual. Now, if the income of the family is less than $60,000, they don't even look at the assets. But most people have incomes higher than that if you have your own business. Ooh, there's a question about triplets. Oh, congratulations. I'm thinking, how did you sleep? Now, one more thing about multiple kids in college is that each student does their own form and the parent will enter the information for each of the students. All right. So if you have twins or triplets, You do 2 applications or 3 applications for each one of them, but the parent will need to contribute to each of them. And the student aid account, that's yours for life. You don't have to create multiple student aid accounts. It's just one. If the parents receive a college education overseas, are the kids considered first-gen students? Yes. Yes. And I should have qualified by getting a 4-year degree in the US just because the educational system in other countries is very different. And navigating the US educational system could be a challenge sometimes. Okay. If one of the parents is not a US citizen and now working at another country, do we list out all the stated parent income? Okay. All right, foreign tax returns. All right, the IRS only transfers domestic U.S. federal tax returns. There's going to be another question that says that the parent earn any income in any foreign income. And you would answer that question there. How much income was earned in a foreign country? Because when you're in a foreign country, obviously you may have to file taxes for that country. Now, the other thing too is if you're a U.S. citizen living abroad, you still have to use federal law. I'm not a tax expert, but I know this little bit. You still have to do a U.S. federal tax return by law. Okay, so we have that, even though the income was earned abroad. Okay, but they still do ask for foreign income earned because I think when you earn income abroad, some of it is exempt if you had to file a tax return in another country. Now, I'm getting too much in detail. Talk to your tax preparer about that because I'm not a tax expert. If the business held in an LLC or a corporation, should I report them even though the LLC corporation owns the business? Yes, because that's your business though. Okay, once again, if you sold that business, how much would you make? Because that's considered an asset. Because even though you have an LLC or a corporation, you still have to file a 1040 as an individual. And that individual, that's your taxable income, but they want to know the value of the assets. Okay. With an adopted child. Let me put it this way, first-gen program, we're very generous. If you say you're first-gen, we believe you. The more the merrier, we'll take everyone. It's really more about providing information and support through the process. Even if you're not first-gen, we can still get you signed up for our taxing initiative. Okay. If the parents are not married, but mainly one parent has income, but the other parent has medical expenses, should we include the other parent on the form? All right. All right. See how the questions about the parents get convoluted? All right. If we go back to that little numbering sequence, are the parents married to each other? Yes. Are they together? Okay, both of their information. They're not married but living together, both of the information. If they're not living together, if they're separated or divorced, then it's only going to be one of the parents. Okay. If they have medical expenses, that's more into the exchange circumstances. If they're exorbitant, if they're super high, because for whatever reason, then you communicate to the college and explain they have additional expenses that are significant compared to previous years, so they can take that into account. We go back to the communication piece. Okay, I'm trying to keep up with the chat, but please interrupt me if there's another question that I'm missing. If you still live with siblings who are older than 21 and have their own income, does that contribute to the student's family income? Okay, so remember, only the students fill out the FAFSA and only the parents' information. Doesn't matter what the siblings do, what the grandparents do, how generous they are. Only you and the parent. No one else's information is reported on the FAFSA. You being the student and the parent or parents, no one else, period. Okay. Okay, if parents have low income, high assets, okay, I'm not a tax expert with that, but the income is the biggest driver of the SAI calculation. When you fill out the FAFSA, it's going to ask you if you fill out certain schedules, or if you qualify for federal means tested programs like SNAP, WIC, free reduced lunch. If you say yes to those and have a low income, they don't look at the assets. If you can't say yes to these other questions about like federal means tested program, or you did fill out certain schedules, they're going to look at the assets. Okay, because let's be honest, people have some very very smart tax advisors that help them move their monies around so they have less taxable income, which is perfectly fine. It's perfectly legal. But the FAFSA is going to ask very specific questions to determine whether or not the assets are considered. Okay, can cash gifts that I give to my child in an UMA account be considered untaxed income? No. Okay, so the value of the UMA is considered a student asset. What you put into it, well, you're not going to count it twice. Okay, because the UMA is the UMA. Okay, And and your income is your income. What you choose to do with your money, who you give it to, that's your decision. You don't double report stuff. Okay. Does the child see the FAFSA form? Okay, do they see the parent's income? No, they do not. Okay, because you don't even see the parent's income. Okay, you click a button and it gets transferred over unless you manually enter that information. But if you manually enter the information, they may be able to see that. But here's the thing. This is where, as a parent, you could start the FAFSA on your own. But for the most part, they're not going to see the income that gets transferred over they will not see income transferred over from the IRS. Is the AGI, the adjusted gross income, used for the income calculation? Yes, it is. Okay. I plan on retiring between this year and the next year. How does this affect my child's FAFSA financially? Congratulations first on your upcoming retirement. That's first and foremost. Second of all, you have an exchange circumstance. What you do is you talk to the financial aid office, because if your income in 2024 or in the months to come is going to be significantly lower compared to 2023, that's a change in financial status. So you explain to them that, so they can take that into account. They may ask for documentation of your upcoming retirement, how much you can be earning. Okay. All right. I will share a PDF of this presentation with the counselors so they can share it with you folks. Yes, the MAP grant works with any public or private, not-for-profit college in the state of Illinois. That's the key thing, in Illinois. So the MAP grant can be used at public universities, community colleges, private, not-for-profit, and then there's like a couple for-profit colleges in Illinois. There's like 125 colleges, Northwestern included. Oh, already answered that question. And I answered the question. Yeah, FAFSA going to be delayed to December. All right. Did I miss any?
I don't think so. I think you've gotten most of the questions.
There was
Thanks,
one
Abel.
quick question about, is the FAFSA a graduation requirement for public high schools in Illinois? And it is a graduation requirement.
It is.
Unless you wanted to fill out an opt-out form, but the vast majority of our graduates do complete the FAFSA to fulfill that requirement.
And I like to remind the folks that it does take some time to fill the FAFSA, but at a minimum, you're going to qualify for this federal unsubsidized loans. Okay. And second of all, many colleges will ask you to fill out the FAFSA anyway before they give you any institutional money. So it's worth your while. Otherwise, you're just going to write a check for the full cost of attendance. And then you can do that. Hey, fill out the non-participation form. Save yourself 30 minutes.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Abel. We really appreciate it. We will share out the presentation later this week via email. But we just really appreciate your time tonight, and you did a great job presenting and answering all of our questions. So thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure. And good luck to everyone.
Yep. Thanks to you, Abel. And
Thanks.
parents, if you have questions, you can reach out to the counseling department at either school. Thanks a lot.